All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Deep Devils. I've got Joe or JJ from State of the Deep. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I think this week we're going to talk a little bit about the deep state and what exactly the deep state is and try to define that a little bit for people. But I thought we start out just kind of catching up a little bit, see how I've been in New York all week long, and I know that you've been doing some of your stuff, and so I think it's a good thing for us to hear, just kind of catch up a little bit, be a little bit loose. We'll move into the topic of deep state because it's a deep topic. And so, what have you been up to this week in particular?
Man, this week I've just been, being a working stiff and working on some stuff on my own on my computer, getting things dialed in still, working on some video editing stuff that I'm not that fluid with yet, but I hope to get better at it. So I've spent a fair amount of time this week doing that kind of stuff. And as I was mentioning to you, beforehand, I don't have any gigs going on right now because where I live, it's sort of the off season. So I've had a little more free time on the weekends to try to catch up on stuff. So that's pretty much it, man. No big excitement for me this past week.
Hey, that's perfectly fine. I'm looking forward to, by the way, you and I have a planned trip to Moscow, Pullman area coming up on the 12th. And it's funny, by the way, as an aside, I didn't tell you this. I have a cracked tooth. Maybe I've told you that before. I have a cracked tooth, and I was going to get it pulled. And then I double booked myself for this Monday, and I said, "Oh crap, can you reschedule me?" And they said, "Yeah, sure. How about November 12th?" I said, "That sounds good." And then somebody said, "Aren't you going to Moscow with Joe on like November 12th?" And I'm like, "Shit! Like, when am I going to ever get this tooth pulled? Like, I've got nonstop business to do." So yeah, I had to be reminded that now I got to reschedule again because November 12th is a no go. But I'm looking forward to that trip. I think that'll be a lot of fun for us. And I think, by the way, one of the things I found out is when I was in New York, I just put a body cam on my chest and walked around downtown New York. And I had one user, now granted, you don't want to build your whole thing around one user, but one user said, literally, that was so entertaining. You could just strap a camera to your chest and walk around, and I would have watched hours and hours all day long footage of New York. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Maybe we can do that same kind of thing in Moscow and Pullman. Just strap it up, and you and I walk and talk, and it might be entertaining shit. So who knows?
Yeah, I didn't know if you were going to spill the beans on the upcoming trip or not. The secret
Oops, cat's
mission.
out of the bag.
Yeah, okay. The cat's out of the bag now. So I guess.
I was gonna. It's funny that I mentioned. You're right. Like there's a part of me. We could still edit this out, but there's a part of me that I was thought. You know what? What should we announce to people that we're gonna be in town? Because what if somebody would be like, if I knew you were coming, I would have talked to you guys. Right now, the negative of that is, if I knew you were coming, maybe I'd shoot your ass.
Yeah,
So
I put a hit out on you.
Right. So, I mean, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing for us to announce we will be in town? I know that one thing that happened when I was in New York is somebody on like the next to last day said, next time, why don't you let people know ahead of time you're going to be in New York so that your fans, which that sounds weird. I don't know if I'm comfortable with fans yet, but your supporters, whatever you want to call it, subscribers who were in New York could have met up with you. And I'm like, yeah, I would have loved that. And I thought I told people a million times I was going to be there. So do we need to communicate more and say, hey, if you're a follower of the Devil's Advocate, subscribe to the show, and you've been watching us and you're in the area, by all means, let us know. Joe and I will come by and have a cup of coffee with you, or sit at the Magritte restaurant or something like that and have a lunch, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a good question. I don't know if you'd want me personally. Like, I don't know. I kind of neutral about it, whether or not you'd want to let people know about it. If anything, it's good so that people can be like, oh, keep an eye out for it.
Yeah.
Once we
Yeah.
post some stuff, I don't know, maybe do a live from there too.
Yeah, I would love to do that if you're up for it. I mean, because I can bring my lighting stuff. Anyways, I don't want to go too long about that, and I think regardless of whether or not we do another announcement, leaving it here in Deep Devils is fine. Deep Devils is not yet a hugely watched show, so the people who are watching it are probably uber fans of the Devil's Advocate show, anyways, as opposed to the general public. But if we want to do something for the general public to let them know we're going to be there in town, we might consider that. But for now, we'll leave it with this. So. We've got the topic of the deep state. And I know when you and I first got together for the Deep Devils, I had a whole list of probably 50 different topics we could talk about. Deep state was one of them, and probably one of the ones that should be early because, well, State of the Deep is kind of your thing, and so it's a playoff of deep state. Do you want to tell everybody your definition of the deep state and what it means to you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the terminology has been varied depending on the sources who's talking about it. It used to be where the idea and the term itself, the deep state, was a crazy conspiracy theory, right? And so it's the general idea is an unelected. There's a few different variations of it, but the more common sort of mainstream definition of it is an unelected bureaucracy in Washington that doesn't that basically is there for a long time. And there's other terms that have been used to describe the same thing are shadow government and permanent Washington. So like the intelligence agencies, right? We don't elect them, right? Those people,
Right.
when a president leaves, a lot of those people are still in their positions, their powerful positions. So they're there for a long time. And sort of the mainstream sort of overview of the deep state is, oh, it's unelected bureaucracy of these powerful people in Washington that pull the strings behind the scenes. And then you have lobbyists and things like that that play into it that have sway over the government and over policy decisions. But if you dig a little bit deeper and you sort of look into different perspectives on the deep state, there's more of a nefarious sort of a overview of it, which is that it's more than just bureaucracy. That it's also a cabal of really powerful people, both financial elites and people within the corporate world and oligarchs and you know uh, people with a lot of sway, either through donations or the use of intelligence agencies, because a lot of people believe, including myself, that the intelligence agencies don't effectively work for the government. They don't answer to the government, that they answer to this unelected bureaucracy. And so the depending on how you look at it, the way that I tend to look at the deep state is more of a global perspective. It would be convenient for people who wanted to euphemize what the deep state is to say it's an unelected bureaucracy in Washington. But I tend to look at it as like the global banking system, powerful entities, oligarchs globally, right? Because everything's global when it comes to money and power. So that's more of how I look at it.
I
The
think,
whole
I mean,
quote unquote
and
permanent Washington, I think, is a euphemism.
yeah, I think too. There's a fine line between entities that have influence on the government, like banking systems and whatever, and those who are quote unquote running the government. One of the things that I remember clearly, and I should have done some research before we talked about this, but back I remember so the term continuity of government. The idea is like a lot of people don't realize the government has planned for a catastrophic situation. Let's say Washington, D.C. has a nuke dropped on Washington, D.C., and all of Congress and the President of the United States gets wiped out at the same time. There are plans in place for the government not to completely fail because everyone was in the same place at the same time. So there's rules that keep it so that not everybody can be in the same place at the same time. Anytime that everyone in Congress is meeting, somebody is secreted away underground in a completely different area so that if that kind of thing happens, we have a president of the United States immediately ready to act, who isn't necessarily the elected president of the United States. It's the person who is on standby to become president if something catastrophic happened. In those kind of situations, people don't think about, but once you explain it to them, they're like, oh, well, that makes some sense. We would have somebody on standby. The scary part comes is, for example, and I wish I would have researched this a bit. When Clinton, for example, was in office, and you realize that the then continuity of government circle was people like Bush, Rumsfeld, Cheney, Colin Powell. They were all in the standby position to take power and become the ruling class if anything catastrophic happened when they hadn't been voted into those positions. And yet, when the leadership changed and Bush is in office, guess who gets all promoted? The same people: Cheney, Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, all the people who were basically in a position to already take over the government if need be, if something catastrophic had happened. So then you start getting into that whole like, how close are we to having a group who's not officially elected by the population, who is on standby to take over the entire country? And could there ever be, God forbid, a coup in which they decide we're going to take over because the current leadership's not working, and so the shadow government, the continuity of government on standby, will take over for the better of the country? There's a lot of weird scenarios that take it into the realm of I can see how they started that process, but can it be abused?
Yeah, and just look at when major decisions are made. For example, a president gets elected, right? They run on a platform. They say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, pandering to their base. And then they get into office, and then oftentimes the people they put in their cabinet are people from the banking industry, from the military industrial complex. You know, it's people that are part of the quote unquote deep state. And then what happens? We see it pretty much every time a new president comes in. They don't do a lot of the things that they campaigned on. And
Right.
and then your average person who might know a little bit about politics would say, well, they have to appease their donors, and of course. But on the flip side of that, if you believe what people say, like, I wish I could remember her name off the top of my head, but she was on that show Redacted. She was a retired colonel, I believe it. I mean, I can't remember what branch, if it was the army, but and she spoke about this. She said straight up, the CIA doesn't answer to the government. They answer to, for lack of a better term, of the deep state, unelected officials, powerful entities, the donors, right? You always hear the term the donor class. And if you really think about it, with what's happened in the last 5.5 years in America and around the world, it's pretty clear that the people that are elected officials oftentimes say they're going to do something and they don't do it. And they ended up making a decision that was really to benefit a higher level of a powerful influence, whether it be financial or, like the banking cartel or donors. I mean, I
Yeah, and
won't
it's
get
one of the
into
things that
specifics, but
it's one of the things that bothers me the most about general Americans is I noticed this trend a long time ago, and it bothers me that more people don't realize it. That is, like you said, when you're campaigning, when you're president and you're campaigning, you have all these amazing promises. I'm going to shut this down. The day I get in office, I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay. There's no longer going to be someplace where we send Americans outside the U.S. soil and whatever. We're going to shut this down. And yet, every president comes in and Guantanamo Bay is still there. I can't tell you the number of presidents who have promised they're going to shut it down as soon as they're in office. And you know what the answer is every single time? Hey, man, my hands are tied. I have to have congressional approval. Yeah, you have to have congressional approval, which is why every single one of these MFers who claim all the things they're going to do, they know that they can't do it without congressional approval, but they'll make you think that I'm going to get in there and I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then the plan never was. That's the thing that people don't catch on. The plan never was to do the things they promised. What their plan was is to tell you, hey, man, I really tried to fight for you, but I'm fighting a huge mess here, and and it's those damn name your party that's getting in my way. So it's their fault, not mine. I would have done it. I would have kept, and yet Americans fall for it every single time. Oh, he's going to do this and he's going to change the world. Oh, but he can't because that damn other party. He knew the other party was there in the first place. So he shouldn't have made the promise that he can't deliver on. And he knows he can't deliver on it, but you bought it anyways. Drives me insane.
yeah. And then if you look at, you have the people that are elected officials, and a lot of times the decisions that get made are coming from outside of them, and extra government things, if you probably heard that term. And there's no accountability because we have the people that are kind of put up in front of us as this person's running for president, this person's running for vice president. But like in the example of like JD Vance, for example, he's a protege of Peter Thiel, right? And after he was critical of Trump in the past, but then he's got the backing of Peter Thiel, a very powerful billionaire who has things that he wants, with Palantir and other things that he's involved with. So he's that's a lot of money, right, behind that, all these tech people. So JD Vance gets picked as the vice president, running mate for Donald Trump, largely, I'm sure, because of there's it's like lobbying that goes on. It's like JD's our boy. He's going to forward our agendas. So we're going to
Yes.
support him for vice president and undoubtedly for president in 2028. And the people behind the scenes, they're not the elected officials. So there's no accountability for any of the things that they do. And
Right.
all the stuff that was allegedly uncovered with the Doge audits of the government, nothing has happened to any of those corrupt institutions that were
Right.
laundering money and stealing from Americans. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So it's like, to your point, they say we're going to do this, 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 and this. And then it gets kind of gets pushed to the background. They know people have short attention spans and something else takes over the news cycle. So the deep state, one of the things that I explicitly researched was when did research on it, what I would get online is specific to the US, right? That's initially how I started this search. But then I kind of expanded on it with, well, it's actually a global thing, right? The deep state is not, it's silly to think that it would just be in America, right? There's global influence on politics because companies are multinational and the banking industry cartel is multinational. So, yeah, it's sort of like a never ending cycle of this
And
show.
let me say, by the way, before I get too far, I wanted to show people this badass slide that you had created. I love this slide, by the way. And I just like, we're going to get talking and we're going to miss this slide. This is I love that it has this like Illuminati symbol in there and it's got a skull. It reminds me of Skull and Bones, because that's another thing about societies where some of these people become brothers in a brotherhood. And it's not a matter of their party, it's a matter of ties that they formed that a lot of times go back to secret societies or clubs like that. But one of the things I wanted to hit about, by the way, and I hope it's not outside the scope of this, but when I was reviewing a book on my show called, or on my channel called, One Nation Under Blackmail, the book that you had turned me on to by Whitney Webb, they were talking about like the rise of Ronald Reagan, where the powers that be were hedging their bets, and they made sure to endorse both a Republican and a Democratic candidate for California, because regardless of which one got in, they would have a better chance of winning the presidency, and so on. And so the money and the deep state, if you will, have created in my opinion, now this is not provable, but in my opinion, they've created a system where Americans believe they only have a choice of two candidates, and then they hedge their bets, and the corporations and the elite who are running things make sure that both of those individuals, whether you're Democrat or Republican, and they tell you only have those two choices, those are the only two choices you get, and both of them are indebted to their platform. So it doesn't matter which turd sandwich you pick, you're going to get the same thing.
Right.
Then furthermore, and I'll try to be brief, but then furthermore, in my opinion, they've created this great system, the Electoral College, which states that even if America wakes up and realizes they have a third option that doesn't have to be one of those two candidates and decide to vote in Joe Blow, the Electoral College can go in the favor of those elites still and say, I don't care what the popular vote is. People don't realize Americans don't vote in the president. The Electoral College does, and you hear people say it, and you think that just sounds like it's nothing. That's true, and it's a big difference. It's not the popular vote that votes the president in; it's the Electoral College, and they've already got it rigged that if you don't pick one of their two choices and you don't get the guy that they want in office, they could, and they never have to because they know how to manipulate the public. They could override your decision in America and put in the person they want. Ultimately, that's their fail-safe mechanism. That's my little personal soapbox.
Yeah, and before I we start getting into the slides specifically, two of the things that I've spoken about for a long time is, uh, in my opinion, one of the key components of the deep state is the intelligence agencies, because the intelligence agencies have a lot of sway on what happens. This is why a lot of times they have these backdoor meetings when people, like, for example, when Tulsi Gabbard had to go in to, because she was Trump's choice for director of national intelligence. So when she went in for her confirmation, to get confirmed, they just hammer you, right? And
Yeah,
I believe that all that stuff, in my opinion, is just theater.
yeah,
They have to make it look like,
yeah.
oh man, we're really tough on this person. We don't want them to get in there because we're against Trump. But then what happens is there's backdoor meetings, right? Private
Right. Yeah,
meetings.
there's the show trial for the public, and then there's the backdoor meetings. Yeah,
Right. And so the intelligence agencies, again, and I'm not going to go into everything that I know about this stuff, because there's a lot of things that I have learned over time from reading about it and listening to people far more knowledgeable about it than myself. But there's a lot of ways that governments can be co-opted, and you'll notice the intelligence agencies never ever face consequences. Never. It never happens unless you have like a whistleblower from the intelligence agencies. Then they're completely ousted and shunned, and they have to leave the country. But when we
and
find
you've got
out
a
about
slide
all these
about that. Yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah.
because, like, I don't know if people out there are aware of this. A lot of you probably are, but USAID, which is the U.S. Agency for International Development, right? People think it's like necessarily an aid organization.
Like helping you out. Yeah,
It's really more of it's for development of projects around the world that benefit the United States, or the military industrial complex, or the intelligence agencies. And I'm sure I mentioned this in the past, but in the book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the author, John Perkins, it's a great book. If you haven't read it, everybody should read it. He says in this book, and it's not like a new book, it's been out a while.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
pretty much straight up says USAID is a CIA cutout company. It's just a CIA cutout. And the reason this is relevant is because you have these organizations, NGOs, non governmental organizations, that are created oftentimes by powerful entities to further their interests, right? And they want to have plausible deniability if stuff goes sideways, either here or in other countries. So they have proxies to do these things. And anyway, so the CIA and the intelligence agencies, they never face consequences. I mean, when's the last time they actually face consequences? It almost never happens, simply
Yeah.
because it falls under the blanket of national security.
Correct.
And in fact,
Correct. Yeah.
your boy Birdie was talking about, what was the greater good doctrine. He talked about that recently. Well, it's the same type of thing. If there's like a little secret piece of legislation that your average person doesn't know about, just like most people didn't know about the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, these things supersede a lot. So if if things are done like in the continuity of government scenario, well, they can just say, oh, it's for the greater good, it's for national security, and
Yeah.
essentially do whatever they want. They can do a lot of really shady things under that umbrella. And
Yes.
and so, between this, like the CIA and in my opinion, the I believe that the government is just working on behalf of the deep, quote unquote, deep state. And that the right versus left stuff is just like theater. They have people that play their scripted roles. Here's your talking points, here's your talking points. And they have to, you know, make it look like they're fighting for their quote unquote side. And I really
And
think, that is very emblematic of what the deep state is, because they're really working for somebody else, not the citizens, in my
And
opinion.
people should, in my opinion, people should start to have woke up when you see politicians who are thinking about running, and this happens too often. Oh well, so and so decided to change their party to whatever because they would have a better chance of getting elected. That should tell you what their agenda really is. Their agenda is to get in office and have power. It's not about, like, the Americans have this ideal. Oh, it's about Christian values, or it's about, right to choice, or whatever your stance is. And so but the fact that your candidate will flip parties if it gives them a better chance to get elected should tell you it's not about your ideals. That their job is to get in office. Once they get in and make promises all day long that they know they can't keep, because that's not what they're there for. They're there for the interests of, like you would say, the deep state, the what's really going on. It's not about all the theater and all the stuff that people think it is. It's get yourself in office first, and of course they have people there. And we're kind of going off the rails. Just it's so deep. Let's pull up some slides that you got here, so that we can have a chance to kind of hit some of your highlights. But I like you said, when we first met, we could talk about this all day long and never for days and never hit all the things that we were involved in and know about. You want to walk us through a little bit on this slide?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it should be pretty clear that there's a clandestine aspect to this deep state, because it's unelected people that are shaping policies beyond, as it says, democratic oversight, and also beyond accountability. Because if decisions are made that are unpopular with the public, well, then you have your fall guys in the government, and that's their role, right? It's their role
Yeah.
to do the press conferences, to lobby for these decisions that get made. And there's a lot of elements to it as well, because you have, like, this stuff goes back a really long time. And I believe in one of our last streams that we did, um, I spoke about that book, The Secret Founding of the United States, which has to do with the Freemasonry, and that the founders of America, the founding fathers, were Freemasons,
Right.
which is a global, sort of secret society. Well, if you look at many institutions, including universities, they have secret societies.
Right.
And some even argue that regular fraternities are a form of secret societies, right? Because they have
Correct. Yes.
things
Yes.
that they
Yeah.
can't share about the fraternity, and the hazing rituals and things like that. Well,
Yeah.
one of the organizations that I'm sure everybody here has heard about, that's intimately connected to the quote unquote deep state, is Skull and Bones, right?
Yep.
The Order
Yeah.
of the Skull and Bones, which is a secret society at Yale that's
Yeah.
populated by kids from elite families, and you don't try to get into it. You have to be chosen
You have to be
to.
tapped. Yeah.
You're
When
right.
you're when, you, when you're there, literally, so like somebody would come up and tap you on the shoulder and invite you to be part of that club. It's funny that you mentioned it because I don't know if you remember the famous, this is maybe back, you had to be a certain age. There was a famous clip where Bush and Clinton were going against each other. And he was on, I think Bush was on a talk show. And the guy said, people are making a lot of the fact that you and Clinton both came from the same secret society. He goes, yeah, I'm sure they are. And they go like, well, what can you say about it? He goes, I can't tell you anything. It's a secret. And they kind of laughed it off like it was a big joke. But I'm like, the fact that your two candidates are both from the same secret society was like, hey, this is going to make people nuts. And he just kind of laughed. He goes, yeah, I'm sure it is going to make people uncomfortable, but what can I say? I can't talk about it. It's a secret society.
Well, that was John Kerry, actually.
Oh, was it Kerry, not Clinton?
Yeah, it was John
Okay.
Kerry and Bush. They're
And
both
Bush, right?
Skull and Bones
Kerry,
guys.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, look, man, just to like get into sort of a little bit more like specifics, which I haven't done yet. So apparently, which I wasn't aware of this, the term deep state supposedly has its roots in Turkish politics,
yeah. I think you've got
and
a
it
slide on that.
from the
Yeah,
90s to describe a shadowy coalition of military intelligence and political elites allegedly manipulating Turkey's government. And then it supposedly gained prominence in the earlier stages of the first Trump administration because he would comment about the deep state. He would make comments about it all the time.
yeah.
And I was not familiar with the term deep state until after 9/11, to be honest. Like I never even heard of the term the deep state until I started looking into things that happened on 9/11 beyond the headlines. And then I started to see that term, and that's when I saw the term shadow government also. And so, which is really, what is it? It's who's really pulling the strings,
I
right?
want to say, I want to, I feel like I want to digress on something, which is the whole. You hinted about it with the Greek society, fraternities, and stuff like that as well. A lot of this, it's really weird. These secret societies have kind of an obsession with the Greek system, with the Greek tragedies and stuff like that. They have a lot of symbolism and a lot of stuff from there. They go through rituals and stuff like this, and it looks like it's all fun and games to just maintain a tradition. But in those things, I feel like there was a book I read about Skull and Bones in particular, where they talked about allegedly. Let me give an example. A candidate who is going to be tapped into the Skull and Bones to be part of this secret society, which is basically a kingmaker kind of situation. If you're going to, Yale, it's not good enough that you're going to Yale. You have to also be on the inner circle where people are going to make kings out of you. These are the kingmakers, and these secret societies. And then there's allegedly books that say, look, they have weird rituals where the candidate literally will be like lay in a coffin naked and masturbate and talk about their secrets, and they're being filmed while doing it. And then later on, it uses blackmail information. How would you like that stuff to come out, kind of thing? And it gets them under their thumb, and that's part of the membership trial. It's a ritual that you go through. You compromise yourself. You give blackmail information, and again, whether that can be proved or not, because a lot of this stuff is all really kept on the down low. But those rituals, some of those things are considered very, very elaborate. There's rumors that those rituals involve things that are illegal, and then they basically get you on the inner circle, like, hey, you want to be part of the inner club, you need to do these things, prove you're one of us, and then we'll make you a king, we'll make you a president, we'll make you governor one day, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I think that's the way the power structure has sort of always operated. You have to be willing to give up your individuality for the good of whatever organization it is. And that's what a fraternity is. I mean, they're nationwide. And, I think a lot of the regular fraternities, think about it. What do people use fraternities for? Forget about secret societies, just regular fraternities.
It's a networking and
Networking.
a brotherhood of, yeah, and
Right.
networking,
You
yeah.
always hear stories like I have a lot of friends that were in fraternities, and it's like, oh, my brother works for, Lockheed Martin, and he got me an interview at Lockheed Martin. That's been going on forever in the world. I mean, overall. And when you talk about, and that's like on a smaller scale. Well, what you
Yeah.
have with the secret societies, it's usually people that already come from powerful families, or they're already connected to big money and power. And
Yeah, and
so,
let me digress for a second. I was in the intelligence community myself, like, and now granted, I was IT support for the intelligence community, but I worked in the intelligence community and I had a top secret clearance. And one thing that I found is a crap ton a crap ton of people in the intelligence community are part of secret societies. And part of the reason being is you've already proven at an early step in this stage that you can keep a secret. That's that when you get into those secret societies by keeping secrets. And so therefore they're good candidates when it comes to later on down the road when they're looking to get into a career in intelligence. Because if you're part of the brotherhood, you've already established that you can become a brother and you won't rat on your brother and you won't tell things that secrets about your brother. You've already proven that loyalty in college or whatever the case may be, and you're a shoe in for the intelligence community. There's a large number of people in intelligence who are part of fraternities and Golden Key Society and Skull and Bones, stuff like that, because they've or Freemasonry or whatever the case may be, whatever your fraternity is, that you've proven brotherhood and that you'll stand up for your brothers and you'll never turn a brother in for anything that you've done is how you get into those positions.
right. And with regards to, all right, so this ties in with the deep state. We've all heard, I know a lot of people have heard of organizations like the World Economic Forum. They've heard about the Council on Foreign Relations. They've heard about, the Carnegie Endowment. Um, it's like another think tank, the Atlantic Council, the Heritage Foundation. These are all like the Trilateral Commission. We've all heard these terms if you've looked into this sort of stuff. The Club of Rome. You know, there's there is there are many. The Bilderberg Group. These are
Yeah, right.
organizations where elite, powerful people meet, and they have these private meetings, and it's often a lot of people from banking, from governments around the world, from huge corporations. It'll be CEOs of major corporations, things like that. I mean, these are the people, I would argue, that really pull the strings and
And
always have.
I hate to go off the rails. I mean, people think that I shy away from conspiracy theory, but when you talk about those groups like the Bilderbergers, or maybe even the Council of Foreign Relations kind of stuff, or groups like that, a lot of times these groups that have these pull, there, if you know anything about symbolism, occultism, and ritual, you will see that they structure their organizations around numeric patterns, councils of nine, and stuff like that. They all go back to old traditions. That if you know the traditions, you start to say, well, what the hell's going on here? Like, is it just a coincidence that they structure themselves like these old fraternities, the old brotherhoods, and they're modern societies and modern groups, but they seem to somehow be structured like the old fraternities and the origins of that shit, which is part of their brotherhood upbringing.
Yeah, and like, let me just give a little more information, right? So, Council on Foreign Relations is really deals with like U.S. foreign policy, global affairs, global
Yeah,
security. There's many other ones, but some of them are think tanks that are more specific to, like, for example, the Aspen Institute. It's similar, but it's related to policy also. Council on Foreign Relations is a pretty large scale think tank. Uh, Organizations like the Atlantic Council that deals a lot with like NATO and transatlantic security. Heritage Foundation, right? Those are the ones who are people have been talking a lot about Agenda 2025 or Agenda 25 or whatever it
yeah,
is. That's the
yeah,
Heritage Foundation. Um, then you have, Trilateral Commission. It
right.
deals with economic and political cooperations in North America. Club of Rome deals with, climate concerns, sustainability, and some of the other. What are some of the other? The World Economic Forum is one that's gotten a lot of attention in the last 5 or 6 years, and
and and,
they kind of
and ultimately
recruit
what you're saying,
young up and coming leaders into the
yeah.
World Economic Forum.
And a lot of what you're saying is like those think tank groups, which aren't technically elected type of things, they're often the ones that have a massive amount of sway in the policies of the U.S. government, more so than the president or whatever. And that these think tanks are the ones that are making the decisions, and they're not, like you said, they're not the quote unquote elected. They're think tank positions. Some of them are elected people on the think tank group, but that's kind of what you're talking about. I think is these the groups that make the decisions for us that aren't really necessarily elected officials to do that. They're just part of a think tank and protecting interests of a bank or the industrial complex, military industrial complex, and things like this.
Yeah. And what happens, you have people that come from these either elite Ivy League schools or from military related positions, like people that maybe went to West Point or the
Yeah,
Citadel or the Naval
itself a
Academy.
brotherhood. Yeah. Hmm.
Right. They're, you know, they get pushed along, and oftentimes through connections they end up in powerful positions, whether it be in government or in the corporate world. Um, if you look
I,
at, there's many examples of people that came from, let's say, Yale or whatever. Like, let me just real quick anecdote. I was listening to psychology lectures that this professor from Yale used to post. This is years ago. His Dr. Paul Bloom, he was like, I like the head of one of the departments in the psychology department at Yale. And one of the things he said, and I never forgot it, he said, "What you will get out of your Yale education more than anything else is the connections that you will make." So he's straight
who
up.
you know.
He
Yeah.
right. He says it's right out loud. It's not the education, it's who you will meet and the connections that you will have as a result of going to Yale or
It,
Harvard
it's
or
it's the
any of the
old
other
it's the
Ivy
old
League
adage.
schools.
It's the old adage. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Right.
You go to these groups and you get into the brotherhood. You get accepted with the right people, and your life will be better because you're in with the right people.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
let's give specifics, right? You talk about a deep state, this sort of clandestine organization of unelected officials. Well, that would include the intelligence community. If you really pay attention, you'll notice a lot of the people that start being pushed for positions in government, and you could just name somebody that's got a high profile in the government. If you dig a little bit past the headlines with those people, oftentimes you will find connections to an industry, a major industry, like they were sort of brought along and supported by a particular industry, or they have some connection to, or family connections to intelligence, right? In one way, shape, or form. And I don't want to go too off the rails talking about specific individuals, but I use J.D. Vance as an example. He went to Yale Law School. I researched if he had any connections to Skull and Bones, and there were no known connections. But he was sort of taken under the wing of Peter Thiel early on. And if you really look in the history of a lot of these people, it oftentimes seems as if their biographies were sort of doctored. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they were, and that's what the public is fed. And so that's what people believe. JD Vance, he's a good old boy, hillbilly elegy. He writes this book. He's just a, good old boy from the Appalachian Mountains. But then you start seeing who he's connected to and who sort of were his mentors. And these are people that are unelected officials that have a lot of power in our government, to say nothing of Elon Musk. You know, he's got tons of government contracts, right? So, and he was given a position in the government. So it's not that hard to really
Well,
understand what the deep state
I want
is.
to make another analogy, and I feel bad because I'm not anti law enforcement, but it's the one I think most people can relate to. Everybody's heard of the blue wall of silence, right?
Yeah.
And that essentially is the brotherhood is more important than anything. So if you've got a bad cop, it's hard to get a good cop to talk about the bad cop because it's the blue wall of silence. The attitude is you shut your effing mouth about your brother and you let him deal with his own problem. So if he comes under scrutiny and he gets caught for the shady shit he did, that's on him, but it's not going to come from one of his brothers. So his brothers are not going to, and that's something that a lot of us can even understand and almost feel like I get it. Like if he did something wrong, I'm not going to be the one. I'm not going to be the one to rat on him. And so you'll have good cops that'll let things slide because they're like, brotherhood first. We're brothers, and I made a promise. I'm not going to be the one to rat on this guy. And so it sucks because, like I said, I don't want me to besmirch law enforcement because I get it. But those brotherhood ties, that's one that a lot of Americans can understand. They can understand the blue wall of silence. And that kind of thing goes to secret societies, Skull and Bones, Golden Key, all of these, Freemasonry to that extent. I mean, even in religious groups, there's a tradition. I don't want to make it religious, but there's traditions that certain religions will only hire people from within their religion. So if you go for a job and you happen to know that the boss is Mormon and you're a Mormon, you're more than likely walking out with that job if nobody else is a Mormon in the thing because they'll tend to hire Mormons. And being part of that brotherhood, that clique, at some level, it's who you know, and it's then it becomes brotherhood above anything else at some point.
Right. I mean, it's like it's anything that has an institutional component to it tends to follow that sort of path, that model. Anything, the military, law enforcement, government, secret societies, fraternities, sororities. There's an institutional component, and people tend to give up their individuality oftentimes to be part of these organizations. And I was never in a fraternity. I was an athlete growing up, so like your team was kind of like your fraternity, right? And it goes for team sports too. But fraternities are national, right? They're national
Mm-hmm.
chapters. And
Right.
and so there is an institutional component in those things and a quote unquote establishment aspect
Well,
to it.
let's use the blue wall of silence again for an example. You've got a perfect grade, right? It's not just that two guys in a particular precinct together are going to have that brotherhood. That brotherhood extends nationwide. So they could be talking about any cop anywhere in the United States, and there's still going to be a feeling of brotherhood with somebody they've never met before, and that those organizations create that brotherhood feeling. I'm going to protect somebody in this brotherhood that I've never met because they're part of my organization and therefore they are a brother. And again, that extends to societies, secret societies as well, and these controlling entities. That there's a fealty to complete strangers if they're part of the same organization over anything else.
Yeah, I mean that really just speaks to human nature and society. There's a tribal element to it. You're part of the same tribe. That goes for sports. That goes for you know fraternities. That goes for the military. All those things have a tribal component. And I think what we see play out year after year after year is the people that get elected end up representing other interests besides the ones of the citizens who essentially got them elected. I mean, we've all seen it a
Yeah.
million times. Um, Tim Dillon recently, not too long ago anyway, he did that interview on CNN, just epic, brilliant interview on CNN. And Tim Dillon's sort of a libertarian comedian. And, he said, look, people elected, voted for Obama because he talked about hope and change, and then his whole cabinet was essentially drafted from Citigroup, you know, and then they end up doing the bidding of their donors rather than what the people who elected them want. And
Right.
if that's not a representation of a deep state, then nothing is. And so this idea of a deep state used to be quote unquote conspiracy theory, but I would argue that any informed person that's not brainwashed can clearly see that it's a real thing, and it's
And understand how it works. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's because now if unless you've had your head in the sand, you can see it happen over and over and over again. You know, and I think that there are larger implications about that, because if we're living in a world where we're being told that our country stands for this and the Constitution stands for that, but yet the people that we're electing don't honor those things,
Yeah.
and they basically substitute their allegiance for the Constitution for their allegiance to larger organizations and donors. I mean, then we're not really living in a democratic society, a democratic republic. And, if they can just make decisions that are purely based on the wants of the donor class, then what are we really doing? I mean, what is all of this? We're living in the matrix if that's the case, and it sure seems like that is the case.
Well, let's talk briefly, since we're kind of, we're reaching a good hour on here. Let's talk about the implications of these. Like, you've got a slide here about the erosion of trust. When people start to realize that there's a deep state, that the people who are elected aren't necessarily acting in your best interest, all of these things that show up. Do you feel that most of Americans still have a trust in their leaders? Because it feels that way to me. Like, if you listen to people who it's amazing to me how many people still believe that if they vote XYZ person into office as president, they're going to change everything. And then 4 years later, they realize nothing's changed, but yet they still believe, well, the next guy that comes in, he's going to change or everything. And it's like, how many times do you need to get told empty promises, watch your guy go in there, talk about draining the swamp or whatever, and then the swamp still exists 4 years later, and all you get is like, well, I tried to drain the swamp, but I couldn't. Well, next time we're going to totally drain the swamp. Whatever. It's like, do you think people just aren't going to get it? They're just not going to do it, or are people waking up?
I think a lot of people are waking up. I think there's been a sort of a rise in more free thinking people, largely in response to social media. And now, while I don't think social media is truly free speech, it has been more so in the last few years because of a lot of things got exposed about backdoor access to social media platforms by the government and things like that. I do think more people are waking up. I do think though that a lot of people, it's it's too much cognitive dissonance for them to accept that the people that they're electing are not really the ones in charge. They're basically, I've said, DA, I swear I'm not just saying this. For years and years and years, I've said the president is just a PR person.
Yeah.
They're there to push whatever agendas that their donors and the powerful entities really want. And they sell it to you. They sell it to the public. Now, a lot of times some are better at hiding their true motivations and their true agendas than others. Some are a lot more obvious about who their allegiance really is too. And I think as a result of that in recent years, people are starting to wake up and see that, wait a minute, this person campaigned on, for example, America First. And a lot of people are seeing that that's really not the case. They're, they, part of their platform was transparency. Well, we're not seeing transparency.
Right.
So
Right.
with the Charlie Kirk case as a prime example. So I think more and more people are waking up. I personally think that it's always been this way, and now it's just more obvious because there is more access to differing pieces of information outside of what the mainstream media pushes. And as a result of that, people have started to wake up.
What I
And
worry about, what I worry about is platforms like us, because there is more and more talk that government officials are saying, look, what are we going to do about controlling what's said on X? What are we going to do about controlling what's said on YouTube? Yeah, and when they and I have to believe, having worked in the intelligence community and not giving anything up, I have to believe that we've already got our fingers deep into the backside of all social media. Google, YouTube, all the American companies that run social media, the government already has access to them. And if that's the case, then just like we say that you and I've talked about the government controlling the media, they're now controlling social media. And if they control social media, how does anybody wake people up when they literally like, how are we going to stop Joe and Lee from talking about this shit and making people talk about it? How are we going to stop? They'll just stop promoting you, stop making an it'll sorry, it's just the algorithm. It's not going out there. Nobody wants
sure,
to hear your shit, you know.
right. And now, again, I mean, it's kind of hard to speak about the deep state without going off on a tangent, but I mean, look at what's been going on social media. Like you have something I've talked about, which I will talk about a lot more in the future, is you have people that are, let's say they're either media personalities that are popular or online content creators that developed a big following. If you pay close attention, the ones that seem to always have a really large reach, a wide reach, they tend to they push a certain narrative. And I'll give an example. There was a certain content creator that I used to follow, and his big thing was leftists this and leftists, it's the leftists, the left, he really, that's like was his big talking point.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started seeing like, well, this guy never gives solutions to anything. He's just very divisive. And
Yeah.
you'll find that the people that push a scripted sort of narrative that's either right or left tend to be the ones that get promoted. And the people that just speak openly about a variety of things, unless they were already popular and had a platform already, they
Right.
tend to not get promoted. And I think that that is because of what you're saying. I believe that there is backdoor access for the government and intelligence. I mean, I have a much more black pilled view of things than most people because I just don't see how you can fix corruption that is so far and
Right.
deep. And I
Yeah.
just don't see how it's possible. And electing
Yeah.
another person, and another thing I've said for years is what good is electing somebody that's a good person if they're part of a corrupt system?
Right.
No one
Right.
person is going to be able to clean up a corrupt system because if
Nope.
anybody gets too close, we all know what happens to them.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, yeah. If you're, yeah, you'll get assassinated is what you'll get if you push too hard, you know. But
Yeah, I mean
and
you'll become suicidal very quickly.
right, yeah. He suicided himself by stabbing himself in the face 27 times and killed himself. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that happens. And the sad thing is I think the blueprint, unfortunately, here's the thing: if you start out um, trying to wake people up from the beginning, I feel like you just won't get promoted. Social media won't allow you to do it. The algorithm won't promote you because it's just something they don't want to go on there. It's almost like the only people who are going to be able to make a change are the people who lie and play the game till they get big. And then when they're big and it's out of control, they blow the roof off and go, I'm going to expose everything today. And then of course they'll get assassinated or suicide themselves shortly afterwards. But it's like the only way they're going to make change is to first play the game for a bunch of time. And that's the part that sucks about what we're talking about is like I can't play the game and try to do things to just win a favor so you can become big so that you can one day reveal it. Like I want to talk about it now, but that's never going to be big.
Right.
I don't
And
know. I'm
look,
kind of
what
digress.
what what we were talking about regarding the you have the two prominent political parties. I mean, it's really it's very simple, right? It really is all these cliches, divide and conquer. Well, what would happen if there was a uniting force in the government? Let's say that there were people who actually tried to come together. Well,
Hmm.
those people would be demonized or ousted or worse, right?
Right.
Because the government wants the population divided. The deep state can't do the things that it does with a united population because people would be like, this is, insane what's happening around the world, what's happening here in America. So, I believe
And
that the,
what sucks too. Like I know how spycraft works a little bit. I know how intelligence works a little bit. Here's the thing: if you ever got somebody that was uniting people, here's what would be happening. There'd be a think tank of people that come. If you're starting to unite people and they have a fear of you because you're uniting people, they'd be like this. Look, dig hard. Does this guy have a drug problem? Does he have a gambling problem? Does he like hookers? Does he like whatever? Find something, and then we're going to get it in his face, and we're going to compromise him, and then we're going to shut him down, and we'll demonize him in the public. Oh yeah, he's caught with like you will just become target number one for everyone in the intelligence community to dig up dirt, find something on you, expose you, and then destroy your movement because that's the way that works.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And so the idea of a deep state to me is not at all controversial. It's we can see how it has played out. We can see it right now in the world, with these powerful organizations that seem to have much more sway over governments than the citizens do. And it's the implications really, I mean, it's pretty it's pretty dire because if that's really the case, and then you have people that are not functioning as representatives of citizens of any country, a given country, they're really functioning as representatives of a much more a powerful entity behind the scenes that's whether it be unelected bureaucrats in Washington or whether it be people from the banking cartel. It points to the big picture issues that we're seeing in the world. And I don't know, I don't have the answer on how to fix it because it's such a
Well,
complex
I
thing.
I agree with you. I don't know that there is a way to fix it, and that's the sad part because there is. It's easy to get defeatist. I put this slide up real quick because I didn't want to miss. Earlier on you teased, you didn't say the name, but you kind of teased Snowden and the whole exposing of surveillance in America and whatever. And here's the thing: like we literally, in my opinion, we've literally become a surveillance state. Our entire intelligence community has basically been weaponized against the U.S. population to get blackmail material on everyone in America. And they've got a giant database of everything on every single person. And if you ever get out of line, they're there ready to try to ruin you somehow. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's the kind of thing, in my opinion, that Snowden was starting to expose is you don't realize how much of your civil liberties is being, these intelligence agencies are not supposed to be illegally tapping your phone, your internet communication, finding out what you do, what your kinks are, who your friends are, who you know, and then being able to draw a mind map to find out who they can connect you to if they ever need to ruin you. That kind of shit should scare the piss out of everyone because that's how they're going to keep the population quelled is to just be able to have so much data on us that they can ruin anybody that they want at any time because there are no secrets.
Yeah, and on a larger scale, how do you keep populations under control? And a never-ending series of crises or psyops to
Yeah,
distract them, to divide them, to keep the people fighting amongst themselves or to keep them scared, confused, demoralized, and divided.
yeah,
And you ever notice how it always seems like when some really serious shit is about to be exposed. Some kind of crisis happens, a major crisis, or
Yeah,
a few of them happen within close succession.
yeah.
And then if you have to keep people in crisis. And when people are in crisis, they're not, they're more likely to be just worrying about getting by and surviving and keeping their sanity rather than organizing effectively. And
It,
I,
I don't want to get this wrong. I hope you remember the details because I don't want to get it wrong. It's like what you're talking about is a lot of times something will happen like the entire board of 23andMe Ancestry or whatever steps down at the same time. And all of a sudden some major thing comes out like a Titan submarine thing. Everybody focuses over here and everybody's like, there probably was a story over there about why the entire board simultaneously stepped down, but it immediately gets overshadowed by whatever news story, some crisis that comes out. And a lot of times when you're a conspiracy theorist minded person, when you see a crisis, the first thing you start doing is looking at page 2 in the newspaper to find out what story was just buried by this. What just happened that they didn't want you to pay attention to because now everybody's all eyes on something else because they probably wanted to hide the fact that something just happened and they don't want it to be on the front page.
right. And then the media, in my opinion, is undoubtedly connected to the deep state. We talked about Operation Mockingbird, and there's been many other types of things like the USAID thing, all that stuff that was going on. The media runs cover for a lot of these things that happen. And so I'll give you an example. Right before, all right, so after all right, COVID stuff started sort of dying out, what happened? The Ukraine war. Russia invades Ukraine, right? After a while, there was sort of a Ukraine exhaustion because it was nonstop in the media and constantly being fought over. And I said to somebody I was communicating with, I said, something big is going to happen soon. And then 3 days later was October 7th.
Right.
And I said, some big event is going to happen because
Yeah.
what happens? Ukraine, the distraction of Ukraine, right? After COVID, you had Ukraine. As exhaustion started to set in, you need something else. You need another big event to take the public's attention, to create chaos. And if you pay attention, you'll see when one thing starts to die out, another major event always happens. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, look, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, what happened shortly after that? Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Another military operation. So, I don't think these things happen by chance. I think there are powerful entities that pull the strings and that our elected officials are not the ones making the big major decisions. They probably are allowed to make some, as long as those decisions don't interfere too much with some of the, larger scale things that are going on. But I think largely there is an unelected, I believe this, cabal of elites that are in fact the ones that are making the decisions in governments around the world.
So I want to wrap up for people a way to kind of summarize what did we just talk about and what's the point? What's your point? What's your point? And I would say for me, and I want you to make your own point too, Joe, if you have a different point. For me, I think the point that I want to make is this: uh, try, if you're not doing so already, to stop thinking like the next president is going to change the world or that the current president is going to change the world, and start asking the questions: who do they know? What groups were they associated with? What fraternities are they involved in? Who did they go to school with? Who did they make buddies? Because those are the groups that we're talking about. The who they knew, who they know, and who put them in power is the bigger thing. And that's the way I think. I just want to say as a takeaway, the reason why we're talking about the deep state is stop focusing on the individual and, well, your guy or your girl is a piece of shit because he or she just did this, and stop playing that game and start looking at who's the organizations who put these people in place in the first place. Look at the organizations, not the people. That would be my takeaway. What's your takeaway, Joe?
Well, first and foremost, I think if you are able to see things for how they really are, or at least closer to how they really are, then you can understand them better. And I don't think you can change something if you don't understand it. And what I've said all along, if people realize that they're being divided intentionally and they're probably being lied to a lot, your quote unquote side is probably lying to you about things to
Yeah.
get you to oppose the other quote unquote side. Remember that, maybe we need our own deep state. Maybe the citizens need to start to come together and really figure out how we can change things rather than expecting somebody else to do it for you.
Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? We could, if I mean, signing your own death warrant, you're going to get suicidal if you start talking about this. Man, wouldn't it be
I'm not
beautiful
suicidal.
if not suicidal? Everybody, I'm not suicidal, and I'm not about to have a heart attack, despite the fact that I look old.
And
The point being is that,
I'm not naive about it, by the way.
yeah,
I
yeah,
understand the system. I understand the big money interests, the power
yeah.
structures that have been in place for a very, very, very long time. I understand all that. But maybe we won't change it in our lifetime. But maybe if the awakening starts to spread now, there will be hope in the future of the system being changed, because I highly doubt it's going to change in our lifetime.
It's funny because I'm doing this on the off the cuff, but there's a part of me that thinks to myself, you got to beat them at their own game. We need to create some kind of fraternity, some kind of organization where people's loyalty to that organization supersedes whether they're Republican or Democrat or this or that. That the ideal of being part of that brotherhood, that fraternity, because that's why we're getting beat, why our pants are getting beat, is because the fraternities who don't have our best intentions at heart are really running everything. And maybe the people's way to fight back is to form their own sort of fraternity or brotherhood in which the fealty to each other and supporting each other in that cause is more important than whether you're Republican or Democrat. And I can be your brother or your sister, whether you have a D or an R in front of your name. It doesn't matter to me whatsoever what your, at the end of the day, what your politics are, because we're bound by a stronger tie.
Yeah, and I agree. Um, there are a lot of problems with that, though, because powerful entities don't want opposition. Someone who I've mentioned before is Ian Carroll, who has gotten pretty popular, doing sort of independent journalism and research. Last summer, or it might have even been this summer. Yeah, I think it was this past summer. He was trying to organize an event to get sort of the free thinkers and different sort of libertarian thinkers and of from different areas of society, comedians and researchers and independent journalists and musicians, to get together to have a big event. And I believe it was supposed to be this past June, excuse me, June, I believe. And it got shut down. Like when people found out where he was going to have the event, that the place that was going to host the event got bombarded with either threats or I don't know what specifically happened, but he had to shut down the event. And so the powerful, if you get to a certain point where you have reach and you're speaking out against the power structure,
And uniting people.
right, there is a lot of opposition to that and powerful opposition to that. So it's a challenge. That's why I say I'm not that hopeful that it can change anytime soon. But the awareness has to start somewhere, and it may not happen in our lifetime. But if more
Yeah.
people start to learn about the way the world works and not be afraid to dig in and question things, at the very least, it could plant the seeds for a major change down the road. At the very least, something that's better than what we have now.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, I'm going to end a little philosophically. It's like it would be nice if we viewed ourselves all on this planet as citizens of Earth. You know, if we were to look at invading armies from the outer space, we would all unite as citizens of Earth, kind of thing, and we would stop doing these petty "my country's better than your country, my dad can beat up your dad," my whatever. It's like let's try to find a way to unite ourselves as we all, at the end of the day, most of us want the same thing. We want to live in peace and want to live in harmony. And we don't want to be manipulated by people with money and power and also with that. And we all want the same thing. How is it that it's so hard for us to view each other as brothers and sisters and unite? So I know that sounds all touchy-feely and philosophical, but it's the best thing I could think of to end on the note. Joe, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about the deep state. Again, at the end of the day, I don't know if anybody's going to walk away and go, "Oh, now I understand what the deep state is and I can define it." I feel like it's just we're doing a lot of philosophical talking about opening up your eyes to the big picture, and it's the best you can do at the moment. I mean, maybe we could have done it better, but I feel like we did an all right job tonight.
And I'll just end with two small things. One, to counter your philosophical wrap up, we may have no choice because they may be pulling off a fake alien invasion soon. If you've been paying
Right,
attention to what's going on. And the final
right.
thing I'll say is if you want to consume some content from somebody that is pretty keyed into all this deep state type stuff, maybe he's even been part of it, but he's very knowledgeable, is Mike Benz. So Mike Benz. He's a pretty well-known guy. You can find his content. He gets pretty deep into the real specific elements. He's extremely knowledgeable. So anyway, I'll just leave y'all with that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I don't know this is the best place to do it, but as a plug, real quick, by the time this airs, which is going to be tomorrow morning, it'll go to members later tonight. But it'll be to the public tomorrow morning. Later that day, I'm going to be going on with a new person for a collaboration from Timeless Mysteries. So if you want to see us talk about Long Island serial killer, that's in there too. But not really related to this case so much. We could have talked about Lisk and tied it in if I wanted to. But anyways, thank you, Joe, for coming on to the show. As always, it's been a pleasure. I hope that these deep devil things will start to take off and build. I think we're still building things at this channel at the Devil's Advocates, and this channel has been a slow growth, but we're definitely I have definitely moved from a small channel to a mid-sized channel, so it is happening. It's just not happening super rapid, and part of the reason is the algorithm isn't real fond of the way we deliver stuff. But I think that if we stick to it, man, I think it's going to be a good deal, and maybe we can make a small dent before we die.
Right on, man. Thanks, DA.
All right, have a good one, everybody. Take it easy.
Bye, everybody.